there's risk on both sides, because I think Canucks fans are only looking at it, and I understand, but they're looking at it and saying that's way too risky. You can't extend him at all. Like, there's people in the chat right now saying just a Demko extension. You can't do that. You can't do it right now. But there's risk for Thatcher too. And there's risk if he doesn't sign an extension as well. And really, that's what I'd like to focus on. The cost of goaltenders is going up. We know this. Like, obviously, Igor Shesterkin signs the mega contract, but you can basically figure out tiers of goaltenders, right? Connor Hellebuyck aside, Connor Hellebuyck took a discount to stay in Winnipeg. Do you agree with me on that? That Connor Hellebuyck could. Okay. So Connor Hellebuyck aside, there's basically tiers. Elite goaltenders, like your Igor Shesterkins, those guys are going to be getting double digits, 10, 11 million, and so on and so on. Guys below that, elite, not top of the line Vezina caliber. Just a step below that, you got your Jeremy Swaymans, your Linus Hallmarks, the 88 to 91 overalls in NHL 25. That range. Jake Ottinger's 8.25. That seems to be what they're signing for. And then you go down to the next tier, you see your Mackenzie Blackwoods, your Joey Decords. You're looking at 5 to 7 million. Like, let's be realistic here. If Thatcher Demko hit the open market today, after that injury-riddled season he had, what do you think he's getting on the open market? Because I would argue it's closer to that Joey Decord level than it is the elite goaltender. I don't think anyone would be lining up to give him long-term at $7 million if he doesn't go out and have a healthy season next year. Correct?
100% agree. There's no way in my mind that a team would give him both the cap hit and the term. There would have to be a sacrifice on one of them.
So now imagine this, Harm. The risk for Demko, if he doesn't sign an extension, because look, the Canucks are going to come to him and they're going to say, hey, this is our chance to get you on a discount. And the risk they're running is that he's not able to finish out that contract. He's going to have to go on LTIR. Obviously, they get some cap relief there, but that's the risk the Canucks are running, right? That's what Jim Rutherford's talking about, is we run the risk of having a goaltender who can't stay healthy. And we've now signed him long-term because he's on an extension. The risk for Thatcher, if he doesn't sign, is he goes out next year and has another injury-riddled campaign. Okay, what did 2 years in a row where you play less than 20 games, 25 games? How many did you play this year? I got to look that up. I should have looked that up. But what do 2 injury-riddled seasons do for you on the open market? 23 games. Where you play less than 25 games, 2 in a row where you don't have, and again, it's multiple injuries. It was multiple injuries this year. What happens if that happens again? All of a sudden, that number is even lower, what you're looking at when he's actually a free agent and has to just go to open market. You're looking at that 1 to 2 year, show me you can stay healthy deal. Like, that is not a position Thatcher wants to be in. So that's the risk from his side if he doesn't sign. Now, there's also risk if he does sign, and that was the context that Moore Rutherford was talking about. He said if there's an extension, there's a risk on both sides. The risk for Demko is if he signs, obviously it's at a discount. The Canucks aren't signing him for $11 million a year. And if you and I agree that we're in this Decord level, I did our poll question. We'll get to it later. I did a 5x6, but whatever you want, make it whatever you want. I'm not going to argue with you. If you say 5x7, I'll say, sure, that's still a discount from what he would get if he had a great year. But that's the risk for Thatcher, is you sign that extension, then you play this season in 2025-26, you have a great year, and all of a sudden you'd be in that 9 to 10, probably not more than that on the open market, but you'd be in that range where teams are lining up to pay you that dollar amount, and all of a sudden you've taken less to stay in Vancouver. That's the risk for Demko if he signs, but there's risk if he doesn't sign the contract either, the contract extension that we assume the Canucks are going to give him.
The problem for me is that even the idea of a discount for Demko this summer, it's still a massive bet, right? Given how expensive goalie contracts have become. For instance, you're talking about that Decord Blackwood range. That's still Blackwood signed for 5.25 times 5. Logan Thompson, who has a relatively shallow record of successes as an NHL starter, got 5.85 times 6. So what does Demko, a player who's had a Vezina finalist season, in Blackwood's case too, Blackwood and Decord, all those guys had maybe 1.5 seasons worth of success as a starter, whereas Demko has injury risk, but his camp is probably arguing, he's at least been a starter for much longer and has more pedigree than those guys. So does he want 6 times 6? Does he want 7 million times 5? That's still a really significant bet, and it's one that I'd be pretty wary of making if I was the Canucks.
For the Canucks, and the way I look at it, Harm, is I know it's not as simple as, oh, you can just LTIR him. I know the Canucks wanted to accrue cap space this year. Obviously, it would have been great if they were actually buyers at the deadline. They weren't, so it was kind of all for naught. But I think the upside of Thatcher Demko at like 5x6 or 5x7, even if he does return to that Vezina caliber goaltender, because also let's be honest here. I know he didn't play much, but we saw it for a few stretches, especially the one before his second injury of the year. He had really started to find
sure, but quads. He finished the year with an 889.
Yes, because
and of course he was shaking off rust, but that's part of the concern, right? Like that's
yes.
You can't say, oh, we saw when he had an 889 this season. Come on.
Okay, yes, but you did see it. You know what I'm talking about.
Sure,
you did see it, right?
Every goaltender has those little mini heaters, though.
Okay, but Demko's also done it for long. We've seen Demko did it the whole year in 23-24.
Sure, but you're specifically talking about this season.
So he shook off rust, and then he was back to that level. Then he got injured again. Then he had to shake off more rust, and then he was back to that level. I don't look at that and say, "Oh, I'm so scared." Yes, there's risk, but I look at it and say, "Man, how sharp of a move does that look if you have a Vezina candidate? Like that's what I think he's going to be. If you have that guy signed for $6 million, like." You're the envy of the entire league. And also, there's already people in the chat saying, well, you just extended Lankinen. Look at what the Oilers are getting for goaltending in the playoffs. We're going to talk about the playoffs and anyone else. You don't think there'd be a taker for Kevin Lankinen on that? Like, it's not like the Canucks made a massive overpay for Kevin Lankinen. He would have got more on the open market. If you ask me, if Kevin Lankinen hit the market this summer, he'd get more than what he's being paid right now by the Canucks. I don't think you'd have trouble or have to attach an asset to move that contract. I don't think you get much back,
but it's still a significant contract, and I don't think he would have gotten much more in free agency.
Sure. What did he get? 4.5?
Or was it
basically
4.5 or 4.75? I need to double check.
Okay, so
it's a five-year,
5.5.
$22.5 million contract.
Not much either way. What I was going to say is Blanken's probably looking at a 5 or 5x5 in free agency. The broader point, though, is that that's not a negative value contract that's massively overpaid for, and they need to attach an asset to ship Kevin Lankinen out of town. And I'm not even saying that they need to do that. I'm just saying they have the option. Like if you're in the chat and you're saying, oh, I don't want to see the Canucks spend $11 million on goaltending or $12 million on goaltending, keep in mind that Demko still has 1 year left on this contract. So they're going to have a buffer year to see how his body holds up with this new training and with all this other stuff that Jim Rutherford was talking about yesterday. They're going to have a year to look at all of that. So you don't need to make a decision in August about Kevin Lankinen. Oh, we got to trade him. Like you're going to have a year, it looks like, of Thatcher Demko and Kevin Lankinen. The alternative is that they could just trade Thatcher Demko. Obviously, we've talked about that as well. But in terms of an extension, this is a really interesting one for me because I think there can be some common ground because as I outlined, there's risk if Thatcher doesn't sign it and there's risk if he does. And to be honest with you, like, I don't know how big the risk really is for the Canucks. And I know, like I said, it's not as simple as just, oh, you can just put him on LTR, but in a way, you can just put him on LTIR.
No, you can't.
What do you mean?
Okay, what if it's like this season where it's stop and go, stop and go, stop and go? You can't just put the guy on LTIR.
Mm-hmm.
And you also have to keep in mind, you have another player in Filipino that you've committed significant money to who also has a lot of injury uncertainty. All
I'm hearing is the Canucks get to trade for a $10 million player. That's all I'm hearing.
It makes it complicated when you have a lot of money tied up into two guys who may or may not play for most of the season.
Mm-hmm. It does. And and that's what I'm saying. It's not as simple as just, oh, you can put them on LTIR, but to some extent you can just put them on LTIR. And I know what you're saying, that it could be stop and go like it was this season, but I don't know, man. I really, really do think about it. And I wasn't thinking about it before. I told you on Friday that I was like, oh, well, that's not going to happen. But there's risk for the player. Like there is reason for Thatcher Demko to want to take a contract that is a significant lowball of what he would get if he turns in a great year next year, which personally I think he's going to. I think he is. I think he has a full offseason to train. I think he was just behind the 8 ball all of last year and just couldn't really get his body ready. And I think he was focusing a lot on that knee, not reporting anything. I think he was focusing a lot on that knee, and maybe that stopped him from preparing properly in all of the other departments of his body, right? Like I think you're going to see a healthy Thatcher Demko next year.